Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Slash Filmcast. I'm David Chen, and with me are.
Devendra Hardwire.
And Jeff Kanata.
Welcome to the show, everyone. What we're going to do on today's podcast, we got some emails to discuss, a lot of Toy Story related emails. And then we are going to move on into some what we've been watching and then conclude with an in depth review. This week, we are going to be reviewing the new Danny Boyle film, Yesterday. And if we have some time, we'll try to squeeze in a Slash Film Court in there as well, which is when we adjudicate your movie-related dilemmas. So that's what we got in store for you. You can find more episodes of the podcast at slashfilmcast.com. You can also email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com, which is what many of you have done. I want to start by reading this email that comes in from Sean M. Now, we've been covering Jeff Kanata not wanting his children to be spoiled on The Empire Strikes Back for weeks now, and I usually don't like to drag something out after many months after people have already lost interest.
Right. Boom goes the dynamite.
Yeah. That's right. But this email was so good and so astute that I felt like I had to read it. It's just like it's so good I had to read it, right? And so the concern here is whether or not Jeff can show his children other pop culture like Toy Story 2 before he shows them The Empire Strikes Back, right?
Right.
This email comes from Sean M., who writes in, I feel compelled to respond after the emailer who said that Toy Story 2 parody of Empire Strikes Back is too oblique of a reference for a child to get. Perhaps this child was not raised in a household where film literacy is sacrosanct and instilled at a very young age, as it is in my household, and surely is in Jeff's also. Allow me to regale you with my personal experience. Just like Jeff, I wanted my daughter Lily to have an unsullied experience with The Empire Strikes Back. I did not show her any Star Wars movies or Clone Wars cartoons until I thought she was at an age where she could fully appreciate them. Lily is a child that has been filming her own movies since she was 3. Movies of her Barbies, or of her little sister in the bassinet, or just of her toes, or holding the camera on the TV, playing a DVD of Strictly Ballroom for its entire runtime. For her first kindergarten open house, the class was assigned to draw a picture of what they wanted to be when they grew up. All the kids drew pictures of mailmen, firemen, football players, and teachers, but Lily drew a picture of herself being a movie director. I've never been so proud to be her parent. But my adulation quickly dissipated and turned to dread when I saw her little kindergarten crush's drawing next to hers. His name was Dakota, and I soon found out that his father had bestowed on his first male child the middle name of Skywalker. And right there in distinct black Crayola was a crude picture of the Dark Lord of the Sith. Yes, Dakota Skywalker proclaimed that he wanted to be Darth Vader when he grows up. Now, I'd sheltered Lily so that she had no idea who Darth Vader was. And here's this little boy right there in her class, a kid whose father was decked out in a Star Wars t-shirt and tattoo sleeves of the Imperial fleet emblazoned on his arms. I had a premonition right there that Dakota Skywalker was obviously poised and ready to spoil the entire trilogy someday while swinging on the monkey bars. I had to act fast. I did not have the luxury of time. I couldn't wait until she was 8 or 10 or 12. Cosmic forces beyond my control had determined it had to be that very day, at a mere 5 years old, that this future female Steven Spielberg was to experience the wonder and majesty and might of a saga from a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So we went home and watched A New Hope, and she absolutely loved it. All except for the part where Princess Leia stays in the rebel base in Yavin, pensively watching the boys saving the day. She asked me why Leia couldn't have been flying in an X-Wing too. Good point, Lily. Good point. We immediately followed it up with Empire, and she was transfixed the entire time. She followed along with everything that happened, recoiled at the AT-ATs, marveled at Yoda, and decided she wanted to someday live in Cloud City. She clenched up during the final showdown between Luke and Vader, entirely transfixed, and then we got to the moment I've been waiting for ever since I saw the little speck of her on the ultrasound. With eyes wide, she listened intently as Vader said, Obi-Wan never told you what happened to your father. He told me enough. He told me you killed him. No, I am your father. Lily shrieked and jumped off the couch and screamed, that's just like Buzz Lightyear.
Oh, dagger. Oh, in the heart.
Doesn't mean they were
heart.
spoiled for Star Wars, though. It was just like the first brush.
Anyway, Jeff,
twist,
may the force be with you. I believe the odds of keeping it from your kid is 3,720 to 1. So
yeah, nice reference.
I kind of love how every generation finds new ways to script their kids, by the way. It's awesome. It's fantastic. It's fun to watch.
So I have just texted you guys 3 pictures. I hope you've seen them. That I happen to have on my phone from a long time ago. These are pictures of my preschool All About Me book from 1981.
Oh, wow.
You just had these ready to go, Jeff.
I realized I had them on my phone. So the first is the cover with little me. And then the second is, well, there's a sort of just a context of like some stuff about me. But then the one that I really want to point you to, this is a book all about me. This is something I filled out in preschool with the aid of my teachers. There's a series of questions. And one of them is what I want to be when I grow up. And do you guys see that?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you said what I want to be a director of movies. That's what you say.
And it says why.
I have many ideas of what they could do in movies.
Boy, does he.
Who's they,
Yeah.
Jeff? Who's they in that?
The people who make movies.
Yeah. Can we tweet this from the /Filmcast account so people can see these?
Sure.
All right. So if you want to see what Jeff is talking about, we'll tweet these photos from the /Filmcast Twitter account, which is twitter.com/filmcast.
The other page that I sent you has my favorite toy is my Star Wars stuff.
Mm.
And my favorite television show is Super Friends. So I was a geek from start. My favorite clothes, underoos. And you'll note, even in preschool, note the name that's written at the top, not by me, but my teacher. Note it.
It looks like it's one N and two T's.
One N and two T's. From preschool, David. People wonder why I say with two N's and one T. From preschool. Just saying. It's a lifelong curse. One N and two T's right here on my preschool thing. So anyway, I sent those to you guys to say I feel a kinship to our writer inner's daughter.
Listen, these are the most pressing problems of our times right now.
This
You know,
is
how do we keep our kids safe from spoilers?
I just want to say that your daughter, who clearly knows what she wants to be when she grows up, even now,
Yes.
can be, like me, a failed movie maker and podcaster.
You mean a cultural genius, Jeff, that millions of people love and respect?
A cultural juggernaut. Also here it says, my favorite friend is Peter. Is that an actual dude, or are you talking about Peter Parker, like from Spider-Man?
Oh, I wish I could say it was Peter Parker. I should have just said yes, it was Peter Parker. But no, but my next door neighbor was this kid named
It's
Peter.
okay. No shame in having an actual human friend, Jeff.
It was my first and only at that time, and my last for many, many years.
Human friends are good. Jeff, I have to say your handwriting is excellent.
Yeah.
No, this was not written by me, as you can tell from the one N and two T's at the top.
Oh, yeah.
These are not written by me. This was with the aid, with the aid of a teacher.
I was about to say, Jeff is some sort of handwriting genius over here. This is like perfect.
I mean, Jeff, here's my question: is how will you feel? How will you feel when, and I say when, not if, your children see Empire Strikes Back and their first reaction is, as in Lily's case, hey, it's just like Buzz Lightyear from Toy Story. Like, what's your reaction going to be?
I mean, just hearing that read aloud made me very sad. But you know,
it was like daggers into your heart, basically.
Daggers into my heart. But in the grand scheme of things, relatively minor. But still, it's a magical moment that you want them to love and appreciate, and that's all it is. It's not trying to recreate my youth, because I don't remember that moment from my childhood, but I would love to be there and witness it and enjoy that roller coaster ride of emotions of expectation. And I don't know, if it doesn't happen, it's not the end of the world, but it is, you know, it would be a lovely thing. And I hope my kids love those movies like I did. And I'm sure they won't. I'm sure there will be things that they love that I don't understand, because that's how generations work. But, you know, I kind of want that
dragging
moment.
out this segment of the podcast over many, many episodes to inure you to the fact that one day your children will be pre-spoiled on Empire Strikes Back.
Well, it's more like the greatest fear, by the way, is that they don't like it at all. Like, they see the twist, they see everything, and they're like, meh, and go back to their phones.
Yeah,
I feel like that's the biggest heartbreak.
Yeah, the oh my gosh, it was in Toy Story, and I remember it because it means something to me.
Yes,
that at least is something. But Daddy, this is dumb. I'm so bored.
Can we go play football now, Daddy?
Yeah,
please.
Yeah, can we watch anything else or turn the TV off? And which is definitely way worse. You're right, Devendra.
I really appreciated this email because I felt like somehow this person, Sean M., like this email was a distillation of both like all of our neuroses into one email somehow. So
so true.
I really love that email to /filmcast@gmail.com. Another Toy Story related email. This one comes in from Jeff from the GibsonReview.com. And Jeff writes in this long email about Toy Story 4. And so I'll just say right now, I'm going to spoil Toy Story 4. So if you want to skip ahead a little bit to when Devindra's doing his What We've Been Watching, that is, a good move if you have not seen Toy Story 4 and don't want to be spoiled. So I'm going to give you just like another 5 to 10 seconds to skip forward or press pause or whatever for Toy Story 4 spoilers. But they're going to start right now. This email comes in from Jeff again to /filmcast@gmail.com. And Jeff writes in this long email about Toy Story 4. I'm just going to read one section from it. I want to hear what your guys' thoughts on this are. Jeff writes in like things he liked, things he didn't like, and then under things he didn't like, he writes, the biggest issue in Final Blow, the end. Woody, a character who has always been about the purpose and spirit of toys and childhood play, chooses self over everything he spent the last 24 years fighting for. In the moment on the roof of the RV, he chooses self-pleasure, the love of Bo, instead of going back to his child. You may say that he ends up helping kids afterwards anyway and enjoys a life of freedom. First of all, in the moment, he isn't making a choice to help other kids. He's making a choice to be with Bo. You may say, yes, but Bo represents freedom and he gets to let go. I ask, to what end? What Bo offers when they are at the top of the carousel is certainly less compelling than a life of play, joy, and childhood wonder, the purpose of a toy that would be passed down from one child to another for years, as Woody has experienced for at least half of his existence. You may say, okay, but he does end up getting to help kids, as shown when he's allowing toys to be given away for free at the carnival. How long is that going to last, really? I mean, at some point, the carnival is eating so much cost from losing those toys that it won't be able to operate, or at least will no longer be able to offer those prize games. So that's not nearly as rewarding as the alternative. Even if
Woody did not do a sufficient profit-loss assessment of the carnival.
Yeah, he did not assess the ROI. So that's not nearly as rewarding as the alternative. Even if Bonnie isn't playing with him right now, eventually he would be given away and played with someone else. Being a lost toy does not serve the purpose of being a toy. This so-called ending for Woody is a betrayal to everything he's believed in. What do you think? What do you think of that? I think it's a valid point.
It's a valid point, but the metaphor I think that the movie is going for is that he is doing what my parents have done,
right?
And that is retire. He's retiring, and he has been a parent and a guardian and a given selflessly for many years, and at a certain point he's retiring and recognizing that his watch is done. And now my watch is ended, he says, and he can go and just relax. That's what it is. But
Jeff, why must these sentient creatures be able to experience joy on their own?
Yeah, I guess that's the question.
I don't know.
Right. He said they serve us and our whims.
That's what they were programmed to do. Come on.
The central question of Toy Story as a franchise is, what if the things we loved as kids could love us back just as much? And that's a beautiful thing, but it's also a horrific notion.
Yeah, actually, I think the central point is, what if the things we loved as kids could feel pain?
Yeah.
What if inanimate objects that we loved could feel pain?
Because I mean, the pure idea that something loves us back and we are completely unaware of it, but we can also we treat it like garbage because we are just unaware that it loves us, is just a terrifying thing. It's a nihilistic, awful idea that if you scratch the surface even a little bit, you start going down a rabbit hole. But I kind of reject the notion of the premise of this email, in the sense that what we're supposed to understand, like I love my parents. I love my dad, right? I love both my parents. And my dad, in his retirement, has done some things that I personally wouldn't agree with, but he earned it. It's
good old late life skydiving. Like, not a good choice.
That I would approve of.
What are you talking about? Like, is this like falling down or something, Jeff? Like, what are you?
No,
what are you referring to?
I'm not going to get into it. I mean, I respect my dad. I'm not going to talk about his life here. But and I love him. But like, whatever he and my mom both, they're not together anymore. But like, whatever they want to do in their retirement to have some joy, and as a parent, I'm recognizing just how much they gave of themselves to ensure that I had a good upbringing. at a certain point, you just got to go, yeah, man, viva con Dios. It's like do what you need to do. It is your life now. You have been selfless and you have set aside your own needs for the needs of your offspring for too long. It's time for you to enjoy yourself and do whatever you want to do. And I think that's kind of where Woody gets.
Yeah.
He has given of himself. He has, fretted and jumped off the back of moving cars. He's done a lot of things in service of other people. And at a certain point, this movie says, okay, Woody, now you can breathe and walk off into the sunset and have your own existence. And I think that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, if Toy Story 3 is about Andy moving on, then Toy Story 4 is about Woody moving on, right?
Right.
I think that's fundamentally the arc of those two films. They made it feel like they made Toy Story 4 feel not necessarily essential, but I felt like it fit in with the other films in a way that I didn't anticipate. I thought it would feel like a vestigial add-on, and instead it felt like, hey, that does feel like it completes the story a little bit. So, in any case, sorry, Jeff G, who writes into us that he didn't enjoy the film as much for that particular aspect, but hopefully you found our arguments about it to be compelling. And finally, I want to read one last email. This one comes in from Nathan in Portland, Oregon. Who writes in about, he says here, quote, I've seen a lot of people talking online about how The Office is leaving Netflix, and some people are devastated by this. Just wanted to write in and suggest the show Schitt's Creek, also on Netflix, which is a somewhat similar style of modern comedy starring Eugene Levy, Catherine O'Hara, Annie Murphy, and Eugene's son, Daniel Levy, who co-created the show with his dad. My one-sentence elevator pitch for the show would be, what if Arrested Development happened in a small rural town like Pawnee, Indiana? It feels a lot more focused than Parks and Recreation.
I think we had that. I think we had that show.
It feels a lot. Are you talking about Parks and Recreation?
Yes.
Feels a lot more focused than Parks and Recreation or Arrested Development or even The Office, with a much smaller cast of colorful characters who are constantly clashing in increasingly crazy and comedic circumstances. Anyway, I couldn't remember if you guys had talked about it in the show, but there are 4 seasons on Netflix. They're all hilarious and supremely quotable, though you might have to give it a few episodes before you start to warm up to all the characters, and it gets its hooks in you. Keep up the great work. That comes in from Nate from Portland, Oregon. Devendra, I feel like you've mentioned Schitt's Creek before in the podcast, right?
I don't know if I've mentioned it. I don't really watch it, but I will say the first season, my wife started watching it. I was not really into, but I think once you got to the second season, I was paying a little more attention. I was more into the characters, and I like the entire cast. So I hope to give it a full go at some point. Catherine O'Hara, she's a goddess. I love her and everything.
I agree. My wife and I started the first season, and we got 3 episodes in, and she was like, I don't want to watch this anymore.
Yeah.
She did not like the kids. She found the kids to be very abrasive. But I was kind of more into it than she. It's just I can't watch things without her, so it's hard.
This email does kind of raise a couple of bits of news that occurred this week that I just feel the need to mention. One of them is that Schitt's Creek airs on a network that recently decided to renew One Day at a Time, the Netflix original series. Any of you guys seen One Day at a Time by any chance?
I haven't. No, I haven't.
Oh, Jeff, you would love it.
Yeah, you would like it.
Sure, I would.
You would like it, Jeff.
Yeah.
It's
just heartwarming and wonderful.
Yep. So One Day at a Time was aired on Netflix for 3 years. It stars, amongst other people, like Rita Moreno, Alyssa Machado, and it also stars my friend Stephen Tobolowsky in the movie, in the show, I should say, and it was canceled. And
I think he's all of our friends, Dave. I mean, maybe more your friend.
I like how Dave claimed ownership of.
Yeah, I mean, I know he's more your friend. I mean, we met him through you, but he's our friend, all of our friend.
I don't dispute that. But Justina Machado, sorry, not Alicia Machado. I got her name wrong. But this show had been canceled after 3 seasons, and people thought that it was dead. There's no way it's coming back. I thought it was dead. It's really hard for a show that's been canceled by a streaming service to be picked up.
And also one that's been passed by several other streaming services too. Nobody really wanted to jump on it.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, not this crazy. So this is the first show ever to have gone from a streaming service, been canceled by a streaming service, and then being picked up by a traditional cable network. And it's just remarkable.
Although, to be fair, it's a network I've never heard of, and I don't know how many people actually subscribe to it, but it's a network.
Yeah,
it's a thing.
The network is Pop, of which Schitt's Creek is like one of their primary shows. And I've read interviews with the head of programming and the head of the network, and they are like seriously considering like investing in this show for the long term. Like, we'll see what the ratings are when this next season comes back, but it's just crazy that it went from not being a show and almost certainly dead to now it might go on for like 5 or 10 years, depending on how things happen. So very happy for all the people who are involved with that show.
A brave new world we're living in.
Yeah, brave new world we're living in, and I know that this show is extremely beloved by all sorts of people, and it is one of those shows that like it warms your heart that a show like that is on the air. It is a very positive, very inclusive message, and I just wanted to give a shout out to One Day at a Time, all fans of One Day at a Time. First 3 seasons are on Netflix. The next season will air on Pop TV. Who knows what's going to happen with the digital streaming rights? They might be licensed by Netflix. The whole thing might come full circle. But anyway, so thanks for the emails and the recommendations. Keep those all coming into /filmcast@gmail.com. And congrats to all the people from One Day at a Time for that show getting picked up again. Back from the dead. Really incredible. Let's get to what we've been watching. Devindra Hardawar, what have you watched this week?
I've seen See You Yesterday, which is not the movie we're reviewing. It's another movie. Another movie with Yesterday in the title. This is a Netflix thing. I believe it premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival. It's a...
Oh, is this that time travel movie?
Yeah, it's a time travel thing. It is a fun teenage time travel romp. The twist is, it's about people you don't typically see in fun sci-fi movies. So this is a movie about 2 kids living in Flatbush, Brooklyn, my neighborhood right now, who are they go to a very fancy high school. I think it's Bronx Science, one of the like higher end public high schools here in New York. It's about these 2 African American kids. They're really great at math and building things. They're kind of child geniuses. They basically figured out time travel, and I love how the movie just kind of accepts that. And they're like, oh, yeah, we got this. And it really just jumps through all that really well. It feels a lot like Back to the Future at certain points. And there are certainly some very obvious nods to that right at the beginning. But I think at the same time, like, it is so different, too, because this is a movie set somewhere where we don't typically see teen-oriented movies like this, and certainly not science fiction ones. And it's able to deal with a lot more. So, yeah, it is these kids exploring time travel and the repercussions of it, but also, the impact of police violence on their communities. And that is actually central to the plot. And I'd also, I'd say this is a good movie for kids and certainly kids of color, but it also gets to be, I don't even know if it has a rating. It gets to be a little adult at times, too. Like, I don't know if this movie has quite balanced that aspect of what it wants to be, because I would really love to recommend it to more teens. I think their parents may not be into some of that. But the overall story, I think, is really well told. The filmmaking is great. And honestly, it is just fantastic to see a movie like this about West Indian Black teens here in America. One of the kids is from Guyana, my home country. That's like, I've never seen that before. There's a huge Guyana flag on their driveway. And it is just I think it's just so refreshing. We've seen this idea many, many times. Kids stumble into time travel and go on adventures. And I think this uses that whole plot dynamic to a much more interesting effect. It's definitely worth watching. It's on Netflix right now. Check it out.
All right. Very cool. That is See You Yesterday.
Yeah.
And it was directed by Stephen Bristol and produced by Spike Lee.
Yep.
Check that out on Netflix. Devindra, what else have you been watching?
I've also seen the first episode of Too Old to Die Young, which is Nicholas Winding Refn's Amazon TV show. And I believe for this segment, Dave has been replaced by like one of those inflatable figures, like the inflatable guy from Airplane. So Dave will not be able to chime in on this. But I have to say, this sure is a Nicholas Winding Refn TV show. I think that's what I really have to say about it. I have seen this first episode. I have no idea what this show is actually about. but it's very pretty. Every shot is perfectly composed, and much of it involves Miles Teller staring off into the distance with a concerned look on his face. And that's pretty much the entire show. I feel like if you're into what Refn does, and certainly his like almost like pornographic love of like cinema, and just like I don't know what you would call his movies, but they're very like, it's like they're making love to the frame sometimes, and he really does that in this show. Miles Teller is a corrupt cop. He works for gangsters, I guess. He's not a good guy. There are a lot of interesting guest stars. I think this first episode has one fun star I didn't expect in it. Yeah, I think my thing is this is very much a Nicholas Winding Refn show. I kind of wonder, can this guy make something about people who are happy, like people who are just like can smile? And maybe smile into the distance for extended periods, longer than they probably should. I would love to see that. This feels like a remix of a lot of things we've seen from him. Reminds me of the Pusher series. Certainly reminds me of Drive. Probably more reminds me of Only God Forgives, which is that movie that I believe nobody liked. So it has its fans. I'm going to keep watching just because I really am into this style. And to me, it's like a nice weeknight meditation almost. The style of it is enough to keep me on board, but man, I really wish I knew what was happening. I wish character motivations were clearer, but it sure is pretty.
All right, well, that's Too Old to Die Young. That's what Devendra Hardwar has been watching. Well, as people on the Slashfilmcast listening know, I was violently ill last week, and I don't know about you guys, but when I get sick, one of the things I like to do, if I'm even well enough to do this, is I get like a huge blanket, snuggle myself into it, get the heating pad on, and just sweat it out. And that's what I did for 2 days last weekend.
While watching extraordinarily disturbing documentaries?
You wish. Actually, one of them is disturbing. But I got caught up with a couple things. I actually, after an extended absence, I finally finished Broad City, the Comedy Central series that recently concluded season 5. And that show is awesome. And the ending of that show, so you can watch the entire series on Hulu right now. And the ending of that show was a real emotional gut punch that I did not see coming. Mm-hmm. So I would highly recommend it. I think it lost its footing a little bit in season 4. Season 4, I would say, is probably the weakest one out of all of them. But seasons 1, 2, 3, and 5, I thought were all top notch. Would strongly recommend. It is hilarious. And the 2 central performances are so strong, specifically Ilana Glazer. I mean, her performance in Broad City is fearless. And it was a constant delight to see what she would do every single episode. And so strongly recommend the show. Check it out if you have a chance. If you're looking for a fun comedy set in New York City, that's Broad City. It's on Hulu. Speaking of comedies, I also had a chance to check out What We Do in the Shadows on FX. I watched the entire first season.
Oh, yeah.
I actually, this took me a few tries, to be honest. Like, I started with episode 1, and I thought, this is so close to the film that I don't really know what value this is
with adding. Some key differences, though.
I felt very similarly. It's like a cover band almost.
Yeah.
A bit. But Matt Berry. Matt Berry's good.
Matt Berry's great. Yeah.
There's some differences, like some of the character mixes are different, right? But over time, the show really reveals itself to take full advantage of its premise. So literally, I'm not even exaggerating. I probably attempted to watch episode 1 like 3 times. And I got like 10 minutes in, I'd be like, I already saw this. Like, it's in the movie. And then finally, I just skipped episode 1. Like, I couldn't even get through. I was just like, I'm just going to go to episode 2. And then
something big does happen at the end of episode 1 that you should still watch.
Well, fair enough. But starting episode 2, I really feel like it starts exploring the full potential of the premise in ways that definitely weren't explored in the film itself. And a lot of that has to do with the characters. Like, there's one character who's like an energy vampire. Like, he's not a regular vampire.
So funny.
And like, I found that to be very clever. Jeff, did you watch the series?
I have not watched the entire first season, but I watched a few episodes. And I liked it. I think I talked about it on the show. I liked it, but it does feel like less than the movie,
I think over the first season, it eventually gets to the point where I feel like it adds meaningfully to the mythology. But I would say the standouts to me are Nadia, who's played by Natasha Demetriou, and Colin Robinson, who's played by Mark Prosh. He's the energy vampire. I just thought those were probably the two of the standout comedic performances of the show for me. And so I eventually found it to be worth the time. And, it might be rough going, especially if you've seen the film. Maybe it's easier if you haven't seen the film. It might be easier to get into it if you haven't seen the movie. But
I said just give it some time. It's like the first season of The Office, right? Which was literally a copy of the UK Office, right. And then they were like, okay, let's be different. Let's do something a little more.
Well, also they ran out of UK Office to copy. Yeah. They're like, oh, there's more than 2 seasons.
Kind of same situation with the show too. So
yeah.
That's What We Do in the Shadows, and that is available on FX. I actually watched it using my YouTube TV app. Finally, I wanted to mention the show I watched called Awake, the $1 Million Game. Have you heard of this?
I only heard about it because you mentioned it.
Are you familiar with the phrase late stage capitalism?
Yes, very
there
much
is
so.
There is this concept called late capitalism or late stage capitalism that's been floating around now, and there's an Atlantic article that I think does a good job of summarizing what it is. This is an Atlantic article by Annie Lowry, who writes, quote, "A job advertisement celebrating sleep deprivation? That's late capitalism. Freewheeling Coachella outfits that somehow all look the same and cost thousands of dollars? Also late capitalism. Same goes for this Wi-Fi connected $400 juicer that does no better job than human hands. Pepsi's advertisement featuring Kendall Jenner. United Airlines forcible removal of a seated passenger who just wanted to go home. And the glorious debacle that was the Fire Festival. The phrase ominous, academic, despairing, and sarcastic has started showing up everywhere. And I'm skipping forward a little bit. Late capitalism, in its current usage, is a catch-all phrase for the indignities and absurdities of our contemporary economy with its yawning inequality and superpowered corporations and shrinking middle class. So that is what late capitalism is. And on Netflix, this show called Awake, the $1 Million Game is a perfect example of late capitalism. And there's actually a great article on Newsweek.com about it entitled, "On Netflix's Awake, the $1 Million Game, contestants stay awake 24 hours to count 4 million quarters." That's the headline of the article. Very accurately describes what's going on in the show. So I'm actually just going to read parts of this article to you because I think it does a better job of describing the show than I possibly could. On Newsweek here, this is by Andrew Whalen. He writes, "Awake, the $1 Million Game on Netflix. In this game, contestants face tedious or uncomfortable challenges while sleep deprived. In the first episode of the new Netflix game show, 7 contestants stay awake for 24 hours to count out as many quarters as they can from a pool of 4 million. By the end, a few took buyouts of a few $1,000s and the rest won nothing. The episode opens with contestants in a secret room where they have 24 hours to shovel quarters into money bags, count them on a table, then dump the haul in their wheelbarrow. Their challenge was not to only maximize their quarter count, but to keep an accurate tally in their head." So just going to stop there for a second. Like, that's kind of the main objective of the game is they are sleep deprived. They need to count out as many quarters as they can from $1 million worth of quarters, and then keep track of it in their head. So you basically win points if you have counted the most and are most accurate, if that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this one guy, JC, who basically had this is the first episode of Awake, the $1 Million Game. JC stared at a picture of his son to motivate himself during the count. And he's like, the host asks, like, "You're looking at your son like, man, we need this." And JC said, "Yes, we do." And so then the contestants are subjected to these humiliating games where they need to punish themselves. Like, basically, for instance, one game was drink as much cold slushy as possible, and whoever drinks the least is eliminated. And then finally, at the episode's end here, I'm quoting from the Newsweek article again, JC won $138,000, burst into tears, and led the audience in a chant of his son's name, Preston. But after more than 24 hours awake, he... Excuse me. But then after more than 24 hours awake, he risked it all for a chance to win $1 million. He lost the final challenge because his coin count at the very beginning of the episode was off by $264. People in the audience covered their mouths in horror. You're leaving here with nothing money-wise, but you got Preston, the host says. Keep watching. Keep watching because the next episode starts in 5, 4, 3, 2, and etc. And then like you see Netflix is like, next coming on next, the next episode of Awake. And like countdown like matches what the host says. Anyway, this is like one of the most upsetting things I've ever watched. And I just
I'm glad to see we are finally at the point of like Japanese game shows where they just like are cruel to the contestants basically. Like that's the show and you're laughing at the cruelty of it. It's kind of hilarious. I don't know.
I mean, hilarious isn't the word I'd use. It is so over the top. It's basically like a precursor to the Running Man. Like
yeah.
It's like so upsetting that
you
these people going through hell for your entertainment.
You could have had Red Snapper. You get nothing.
That is what's upsetting. One of the great things about Who Wants to Be a Millionaire that I think people didn't like appreciate enough when it was on was that like no matter what, like there were like little stages, like you could you're going home with at least $16,000 or you're going home with at least $100,000. Like there was still drama, but you wouldn't feel like a terrible human being for watching the show. You know what I mean? Because at least even if they lost $1 million, at least they went on with $100,000. This guy stayed up for 24 hours, subjected himself to a series of humiliating tasks, and then left with nothing. I mean, that just feels like it makes the viewer complicit, in the horrors that the show has inflicted on your fellow humans. So I do not recommend the show Awake the $1 Million Game. And that's all I have to say about it. Are any of you intrigued by this?
No.
Okay. Well, I'm glad I spent all this time warning people away from it then. But stay away from Awake the $1 Million Game. Oh, finally, one other thing I wanted to shout out. ER. The entire series ER went on sale for $70.
Oh boy, you bought it, didn't you?
I bought it. It's.
I mean, that's a steal. $70 for that? Yeah.
Dude, that was like the dawn of this golden age.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
ER was the beginning of it.
I think one of the it is such an incredible deal. Like, do you guys remember how much money the show cost to make in its heyday? It cost.
I remember having ER watching parties. And people just ravenous about it. It was appointment viewing. It was serialized storytelling to a certain extent when nobody was doing serialized storytelling. Yeah, it was a big deal.
It cost $13 million per episode to make that show in its heyday, and they made like 22 episodes per year. This is when they were still on that like really ludicrous shooting schedule that network TV has you on, and the idea that you can own something that costs $14 million per episode to make over the course of 330 episodes over the course of 15 years.
Like, think about how much those DVD sets cost back in the day. I remember like VHS box sets. Like it was rough if you wanted to own and watch ER on demand.
I bought the season 1 DVD for I think it was like $40 or $50 at the time.
Yeah.
And now you can get the entire series for $70. That was a good deal. But anyway, the show...
Are you going to tell us whether that show holds up or not?
I would say it does in general. I watched a couple of episodes. The big one I watched that I hadn't seen before, actually, was called Love's Labor Lost.
Oh, yeah.
Which, like, just by the title, that show is going to freaking devastate you. And it was extremely good. There is an oral history, a TV guide. It won multiple Emmys. It was also one of the first times that America welcomed in Josh Lyman, a.k.a. Bradley Whitford, into their living rooms. It was viewed by 33 million people when it first aired in season 1. And it is still really incredible. I still find it very moving.
I feel like that show was a victim of a lot of back behind the scenes contract dispute, cast changes. And it would have been better if the era we're in now where casts sort of stick with TV longer. Because ER was happening at a time when you used TV to try to get to a movie career.
Right.
And that
now it's the other way around, basically.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, it is. And I feel like if we had had a cast that stuck around over the long term, if Clooney had stayed and a lot of those other actors had stayed as from the original cast longer, I think the storytelling would have benefited, and it would have been a stronger show over a longer period.
I will say that I think one of the things that the show suffers from is after around season 7 or 8, the storylines become increasingly ludicrous, right? Like they become more and more ridiculous.
The ER explodes every week.
Yeah,
there's like some car driving through the front of it every week.
Has the TV show really survived past season 8? Like maybe other than The Simpsons, and that was up till 10, and then after that, it's like I don't know.
Well, season 8, and you're making 22 episodes a year too, right?
Yeah. Oh man, that's so rough. It's all on Hulu, by the way. If you don't feel like spending this money, for
it's true. The entire season is on Hulu. So I actually watched Broad City on Hulu, as I mentioned earlier, and I probably saw the same ad for Listerine. No exaggeration, 892 times. And so I was just like, you know what? If I'm not going to rewatch ER like this, like I can't have.
And also, no breaking point for spending a couple bucks more to go ad free. Like nothing. Okay.
Yeah. Can I ask you guys a tangential question to this?
Please.
Do you think it is better or worse when it displays now showing ad 4 of 6?
God.
Oh, I actually love all that stuff. I love all their ad tech stuff. Like they have like, hey, you can choose which ad you want to watch. They have like you can watch one long ad in exchange for no commercial breaks. Like
what is this Hulu ad nonsense? Like you guys, come on.
Yeah, I pay for no ad Hulu.
That's 2 coffees a month.
I don't play.
You can do it.
But what I've been watching is was on the TBS streaming, and they do the thing where they go.
Oh God!
1 of 6 commercials, and you're just like, oh, kill me, just kill me.
Networks are the worst about it. CBS, I think, did that for some things too. Like it's you can't really trust any of those ad things, man.
I actually really like it. I like that it's like, oh hey, I know roughly how much time I have to go to the bathroom before the commercial break is over. So I really appreciate it.
Just wait until they can track your eyes and know that you're there watching it. Like that's not too far away.
We'll pause and wait for you to come back from the bathroom to deliver your ad to your face.
Indeed. As for why I don't get the Hulu commercial free, I actually am not opposed to that, especially if I'm going to marathon something, Devendra. But here's the thing:
original shows. It's worth it for that alone. But
here's the thing: is I got this deal a while back that's like you get Hulu for 12 months for like $1 per month. So I'm like, okay, well I can't give up the deal. You know what I mean? Like I can't give that up.
Yeah, you're just giving up hours of your life.
Yeah. Instead, I'm just consuming hours of my life with ads. So, but actually, to be honest,
top 10.
Wait, what'd you say? Say again.
Comes out on top then.
Yeah, it's a good question. But to be honest, sometimes I find the ad breaks refreshing. It like takes some pressure off of needing to concentrate the entire time. So,
such an odd bird, David.
Looking on the bright side of
standing there staring at the television with so much effort. I'm watching television. Oh, thank God. Thank God there's an ad. Okay. I can stop for a second.
Indeed.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, so anyway, that's ER. It was on sale for $70 for 330 episodes. I can't pass up a good deal, and so I bought it. I think that sale's probably over now, but it'll probably be back again at some point. Jeff Kanata, what have you been watching this week?
Well, I wanted to mention that The Detour is back, a criminally underrated half-hour comedy, in my opinion. This is on TBS. Like I said, I was watching it on the TBS app on my Roku. With a whole bunch of ads, but gives you a break from concentrating so hard on the comedy. This is the show from Jason Jones and his wife. God, come on,
Samantha Bee.
Samantha Bee. Yes, Samantha Bee produces, and Jason Jones stars and co-writes. It is. I adore this show. I've talked about it before on the show. We're in season 4 now. Season 4 just debuted, and I love this. The idea of the show started with a family on a road trip, and they have to make a detour. Hence the detour, and crazy stuff starts happening. Season 1 is fantastic. I highly recommend you start with season 1. But we're in season 4 now, and they have just decided to just make the show go completely bonkers. It is insane. The first episode of season 4. It takes place in Tibet and like all over the world.
The show escalates pretty quickly.
I just love it. I love it. It's a cartoon now, which I love. I mean, there's in the first episode, there's like this extended pratfall that lasts for like 5 minutes, and not that long, but it lasts like a full minute, and it is it's glorious. I mean, this show is my sense of humor to a T. It's goofy, it's ridiculous, it's over the top, but it is really smart in all those ways too. I love The Detour, and nobody talks about it, and I think that's a crime. I love the fact that it's still going, and I love the characters. It's so smart and so well written.
All right, well, that's The Detour. It's on TBS right now. That's going to bring us to the end of what we've been watching. Before we move on, why don't we thank the people who donated to the podcast this week? This week, I think this one is a late thank you. I think we got this donation a couple weeks ago. But Chris Gibson from Fairfax, Virginia donated, and he writes, "In defense of the lazy binge, thanks for everything you guys do. I've really enjoyed listening over the years." The lazy binge, I think, is a concept I introduced a couple weeks ago, or mentioned a couple weeks ago, right? The idea that, like,
the downgrade of the good sit.
You and your good friend Stephen Tobolowsky.
Yeah, that's right. That you'd binge a show but not like fully pay attention. That's a lazy binge. And I think you both found it extremely disrespectful, if I recall correctly. But Chris from Fairfax, Virginia, doesn't find it disrespectful. He's donating in defense of it. If you want to join him in donating to the /Filmcast, you can always go to paypal.me/filmcast. That's paypal.me/filmcast. You can also go to /film.com, use the /filmcast tab, use the PayPal links on the side of the page. Thanks to everyone who donates and help us defray the cost of seeing movies and putting on the show for you. You should never donate if it in any way causes you any kind of hardship. But if you do want to help us out and it isn't too much of hardship for you, we really appreciate it. Thanks so much to all of our donors each week. Thanks to all the people who donate every month. You're all awesome. Let's get to the /Film Court. All right, that music means it's time for the /Film Court, which is our very irregular segment whereby we adjudicate your movie-related dilemmas. This one's not a regular /Film Court, but I thought it was an interesting one to discuss. It comes in from Richard A., who writes in, quote, "I recently went to the movies to watch The Beach Bum. And the only thing I knew about this movie was that Matthew McConaughey played the main character. With only that information in hand, I was disappointed with how the movie was going, and 30 to 40 minutes in, I could not take it anymore. I had to leave. But I'm wondering, how do you guys feel about leaving movies before they are done? Does talking about movies make you stay all the way to the end? Do you talk about your experience without finishing the movie? I know there's a lot of questions, but I wanted to know what you thought. Hope you keep doing the podcast and keep having fun of the movies. You really make my day when a new episode comes out." That comes in from Richard A.,
oh boy,
who writes in, "Do you ever walk out of movies?" So we will answer this question with the understanding that we are not, like, quote unquote civilians. You know, like, we do review movies on a weekly podcast, and so
but we're not really like full blown film critics either. We're in this weird nether realm of having some responsibility, but also the freedom to say fuck it, I guess. Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah,
it's true. I mean, there's a responsibility to you guys that I take seriously. I'm not gonna. There's definitely movies that I've wanted to walk out of or stop. More frequently, it's stop watching in the comfort of my own home.
Yeah,
I feel like once I've made the effort to actually put on pants and get out of the house and sit in a theater by myself, I'm there for the duration. But the ones where it's like, you know, put on the Netflix show or the movie.
I think probably the most recent one, Jeff, that you probably were most tempted to turn off was Mandy, right? That's probably the one that, like,
I would never have finished that movie were it not for this show.
Yeah,
that is correct.
Yeah. But I would say at this point it is extremely rare for me to walk out of a movie because I need the extremely nominal cred that I receive from seeing the movie. Right, like you can't. I don't even feel like you can properly bash a movie or like take down a movie unless you sat through the whole thing. And so usually what happens is I'm like 30 minutes, 40 minutes into a movie, I'm like, this is terrible. I hate this. But I can't even in good conscience say how bad it is publicly unless I've seen the whole thing. Right. Sure. I will say a movie I didn't think was bad or anything, but like a movie that baffled me until the last like 20 minutes was the movie Burning. And, you know, my wife and I watched that movie, Burning, which is now on Netflix. And the first 2 hours, we're like, okay, like, this isn't terrible, but we have no idea what this movie's about or why people think it's awesome. And then the final 20 minutes just kind of, like, pulls everything together in a really interesting way that, you know, really made us think about the movie for a very long time afterwards. And so it is possible for... I'm not saying Burning is a movie that needed saving or anything. I know lots of people love that movie all the way through. But it is possible for a movie to dramatically change in the last 20, 30 minutes, and you might miss it if you walk out.
It's very rare.
Yeah, that tiny infinitesimal chance is worth the excruciating. Yeah, no, I'm with you. I feel that too. I think the only movie that I remember walking out of, honestly, and you guys are going to get mad when I say this. I may have already said this at some point.
Yeah.
Was The Mummy.
Oh.
The original Mummy with Brendan Fraser.
Have you ever gone back to that?
No, never gone back to it.
I think you'd enjoy the hell out of that movie.
Wow.
Jeff. Like it is on Netflix right now, I think. And it's
it is.
Yeah.
It is a lot of fun,
that movie
Jeffrey.
Was so bad. And my buddy and I went to see it. And went to the movies in the middle of the day. We were so excited to watch it, and I think right after the scene where all of the bookcases fall like dominoes, we turned to each other and we were like, "Do you want to go?" And yes, and we left. I think this is the last time I walked out of an actual movie in a movie theater.
I think that's a case too of like tone, right? If you're not into the tone of a movie, it doesn't even matter like how good people say it is. Like it's just kind of lost in you. I just tried recently. Started to watch Vice on an airplane, and I turned that thing off within 15 minutes. And I'm not gonna like qualify, like I can't judge the entire movie, but I can't say I hated those first 15 minutes, and I don't know when I'm gonna see the rest of that movie. So, yeah.
We've done a lot of TV shows where my wife and I turn to each other and we're like, no, too many other things we think we might like.
Yes. Yeah. I think in terms of a theater, the only time I've ever walked out was when like something was just wrong with the presentation or something. So like our college, Dave, when they would used to show movies at like the campus center, sometimes it was just 4:3 for no reason because that was the copy they got. And I'm like, I'm not even gonna do this. This is a big screen. I cannot watch this movie square. Sorry.
That's ridiculous that they would even do that.
Yeah, I can't say why that happened, but so Jeff, the only movie you ever walked out of was The Mummy, huh?
The only movie that I can remember walking out of. Yeah, I don't think I've walked out of a movie in many, many years. Also because I've been reviewing movies since 2007, so
right. Right. Because, it is kind of like when you're doing this podcast, if you walk out, like, none of us have ever walked out. Like, if we agree to review it, we are not going to walk out, right? Like, there's been many times when, like, I've been watching a movie we agreed to review, and it's terrible, and it's like, I can't believe we agreed to review it. But, like, none of us have ever dared dishonor the pact we make of, like, we're going to see this movie and talk about it, right?
I would love to walk out of Transcendence, by the way. Like, I still recoil thinking of that movie.
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
But what were you saying, Jeff? Which one for you?
I said I watched all of Gods of Egypt.
Yeah. We all hurt for that one.
Devindra, any movies you can remember walking out of in your life?
I mean, like I just said, like only when the presentation was messed up. And I've sat through a lot of bad movies. Certainly for this show, like I have not walked out of any. I've done some film festivals and stuff too, and I even think I've like given up on movies there, where I think it's easier to be like, oh, this is just not working. I'm gonna go. Watch the next thing.
No, definitely that's definitely happened to me where I've been at a film festival and I've been like 30 minutes into a documentary and I've just been like, you know what, like, I'm just not interested enough in this topic to want to see the rest of it. So.
Can I also say that, I think several of us, I did, worked at a movie theater in high school. And I would say just anecdotally that I was shocked at how many people made that a routine occurrence of just walking out and asking for a refund. They went into a movie and they were like, nope, I don't like this. I want my money back. And we would always give them their money back, or not really their money back, a voucher to see a free movie later.
I did not even know you could do that. That's insane to me, but okay.
I think they probably still do it, but questions asked. They walked out and they went, I'm leaving. I don't like this movie. And we would go, okay, here's a voucher for a free movie in the future.
Yeah. I think they still
People did it all the time.
I actually don't necessarily, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing as long as they don't finish the movie. That's what I don't understand is if you sit through the entire 2 hours and then you come out, you're like, that wasn't good. Give me the money. Like if you leave after like 20 minutes, that I can actually respect.
Yeah.
But if you watch the whole thing, it's kind of like if you get served a meal at a restaurant that's not good and you eat the entire thing and you're like, that wasn't good. Give me the money back.
Yeah.
Like I always try to at least leave a few pieces there. You know what I mean? On the plate.
It's difficult, but I try not to scarf down that thing I hated.
That's exactly correct. But yeah, I mean, I think at this stage of life, it's like if you have gone to the trouble to get out to the theater, and you've seen enough of the movie to know that you don't like it, then at this point in my life right now, it's like it's worth it more to me to finish the movie so I can talk about it. Like
it's just harder to get up in the dark and leave. It's just the path of least resistance is just to stay put and endure it.
It's just another hour of my life that's slipping away from me like grains of sand through my fingers.
And as we know, you don't value your life enough to give up an ad on Hulu. So
it's not like leaving is going to make the night better. I'm just going to return to my terrible life.
Boy, you guys nailed it. Yeah, so that's why it's basically not worth walking out of movies at this point. So, well, I hope that has helped answer your question, listener. Really appreciate all the emails. If you want to submit your movie-related dilemma or question, you can always write into us at /filmcast@gmail.com. Let's get to our review of Danny Boyle's Yesterday. That was from the trailer of Yesterday, the new movie by Danny Boyle. I'm going to read the plot summary. Jack Malik is a struggling singer-songwriter in an English seaside town whose dreams of fame are rapidly fading, despite the fierce devotion and support of his childhood best friend Ellie. After a freak bus accident during a mysterious global blackout, Jack wakes up to discover that the Beatles have never existed. Performing songs by the greatest band in history to a world that has never heard them, Jack becomes an overnight sensation with a little help from his agent. So that is the plot of this movie, and Danny Boyle, always a person who makes interesting movies. No matter what I think of the movie, right, I always think it has at least some interesting stylistic flourishes.
He likes to stretch himself, which I really appreciate. Yeah. And also coming into this movie too, right? This is after Bond fell apart for him. Yeah. So that's kind of interesting looking at this film through that angle.
Yeah. So almost exactly the same as a Bond movie, really.
Yes. Yeah.
Indeed. So Devendra Hardawar, your thoughts on Yesterday?
I'll say this up front. I don't dislike the Beatles, but I don't have like a huge love for them. I'm not a big listener of their songs. I can recognize some of them. But like the initial crux of this movie, is like, what if the Beatles disappear? I'm like, okay, cool. I guess that's a big loss for some people. So I think the pitch of this movie is not something I was super into. But I do like, I love Danny Boyle, and I trust him to do something interesting with it. And I think overall, coming out of this movie, I really liked it. It's very sweet. I don't think it didn't feel particularly complex to me. And it still took me, I'm still like trying to say like, what are the deeper things this movie is saying? But as I was watching it, it definitely just felt like, this is a romantic comedy or a romance in some ways with the trappings of like something that's kind of science fiction. And then coming out, I realized, oh yeah, Richard Curtis wrote this. Of course he wrote this movie. So imagining a Danny Boyle movie written by the guy who wrote and directed Love Actually, kind of makes sense. This is kind of what I expect.
We should say he is a legendary screenwriter. He's legendary. Right? Four Weddings and a Funeral, Notting Hill, Bridget Jones' Diary, Love Actually, War Horse, obviously from 2011.
The best.
Saving the best for 2011, War Horse. And so, very, very talented screenwriter, but also like has done a lot to shape what we think of as the modern romantic comedy. Right?
Yes. Yeah.
And I was listening to Mark Kermode's review, and he's like, this is the best directed Richard Curtis movie ever.
I agree with that.
And I don't dispute that at all. I think it's
but
very well
I'll also add, like, the world is a hellstorm right now. And honestly, looking at news, looking at Twitter, doing anything really reminds you that our government currently has, migrants and children in cages in deplorable conditions. Our country is being run by a psychopath. Like, he was just buddy with Vladimir Putin and, Kim Jong-un. Like, things are insane. So a movie that's about the Beatles and refining the magic of that and the power of pop culture, maybe is a good thing right now. I'm totally fine with consuming this and feeling a little bit of joy in the world because of this.
But it sounds like you thought it was only okay, right, Devendra?
Yeah, I would say only okay. I think I'm appreciating it more and more. I really liked the lead. Forget his name.
Yeah, Hamish
Patel. And also Lily Allen is Lily James is adorable in this movie.
She's a delight.
So there's that. I think there are certainly things we could talk about in terms of her role as a character.
Yes.
But it's I think fun and maybe not too memorable, but it definitely made me think more about the impact of the Beatles and honestly any bit of pop culture that brings joy into the world.
Jeff Canado with one N and two T's. Your thoughts on yesterday?
Well, Dave, I guess you could say my thoughts about yesterday are best summed up in the form of a limerick. The music comes together to fit like a glove, and it manages to help, sort of, but I can't let it be. This film's bad to me because they thought all you need is love.
Oh, wow. That was very good. That is actually very good.
There. Yeah.
See?
Very good, Jeff.
Up
Bravo.
to the level of difficulty on that one, fellas.
Yep. Very nicely done. Very nicely done.
But it does sum up what I think about this movie, which is I adore the Beatles. I went through a massive Beatles phase, especially in high school. My friends and I petitioned. We were nerds, but we petitioned the committee, whatever committee it was, to have the homecoming theme be "Let It Be," and it worked, and I was just super into the Beatles. I love the Beatles. So the music in this movie is a joy, and I think as it is covered by Himesh Patel or whatever group of people they used for his voice, I think it was actually him.
It was actually him, yeah.
Yeah. He's great. He's great. The covers are evocative and make you hear the lyrics in new and interesting ways. And the premise of this movie is phenomenal. It's a really cool, interesting idea that this movie is not interested at all in exploring.
Yep.
And that is a major crime. This movie is a romantic comedy that doesn't even do romantic comedy very well. And it uses this sort of magic spell to just get to the romance, but the romance is poorly executed and not as much as I loved the leads. I thought the leads were great. They had charm and grace and talent, and were very watchable. I just adore Lily James. I think she's great. But as you referred to, Devindra, I have never noticed a movie more where the female lead only exists. We literally know nothing about her other than she wants to have a boy.
Well, she's a school teacher, but she is one of those endlessly devoted, female characters who will do anything.
What wants and desires does she have in this world? One. Yeah. There's one want and desire she exists for. Her entire existence is built around having him fall in love with her. That is. I will say,
as we go into spoilers, I think there's more. The movie adds more later on, and she, at the very least, we know she's a school teacher, and she kind of wants to continue that life too. But for the first half, I was certainly not a fan of just her being the devoted, not quite girlfriend thing.
I was shocked at how just inhuman she was. She's just this thing that is there to want him.
She's a manic pixie dream manager, is what I would
pretty much.
I guess, but also, she literally has nothing. There's nothing about her. There's nothing. I don't know, but. And the movie, it just doesn't even do their romance well. It doesn't do the love story well. But that isn't even the worst part, because there's this really cool sci-fi premise that really had the potential to talk about art and what would happen if you just removed the Beatles from the world? Like what wouldn't be here? I would love to have a sci-fi movie explore that idea.
I think the movie did it didn't really show the impact of what we lost, I guess, when everybody forgot about the Beatles, but this is spoiler talk. And I do think where the movie goes kind of explores the value of these things that we lose sometimes.
Well, and the other thing that
being grateful for it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. The other thing the movie doesn't, and we'll get to spoilers and talk specifics, but the movie lets the main character off the hook over and over and over. It just gives him an out all the time. And it just diffuses any stakes by just letting him off the hook. And I know movies are supposed to be, these kind of romantic comedies are supposed to be light and fun, but this movie really had an opportunity to do something really interesting with this premise, and it absolutely fumbles the ball and is not interested in it. It's just basically not interested in doing all the juicy stuff that would result from this and making a statement. And there's a really interesting sci-fi moment at the end that could have been gobsmacking, but ultimately doesn't mean anything. It's just another out for the main character. And I was very disappointed in this movie, even as I found it very watchable and charming, and the music lifts it. I mean, I love this music, and it surges through this movie, and it's performed often and well. And there's some funny stuff, but it ultimately just feels like a massive failure on every level to me.
Wow. Massive failure. Jeez. I've seen everyone hating on this movie, and I have to say I didn't hate it. I think I found it to be a perfectly fine romantic comedy.
Yeah.
But like sometimes I can kind of like tell how much I appreciated a movie by how much time I spend recapping the movie to my wife afterwards. Like this is one of those movies where like days later I was still like, yeah, and this part of the movie when this happened and this is so interesting, and I'm like, even though the movie was only okay, there were so many interesting ideas it brought up that I couldn't it sent my mind spinning about all the possibilities. I agree with you, Jeff. It does absolutely nothing interesting with these ideas, right? It does not pay off the extremely promising premise whatsoever, but it made me think about all these things that I had never thought about before, at least not in the way that I did after I watched this. Things about like one of the fundamental questions is if the Beatles had never existed, which like who knows if you could even figure out a way to quantify that, right? But if the Beatles had never existed and you just started playing their music today, would you even be able to would people even recognize it as brilliant?
Well, that's the thing that I think is so interesting is there's a moment very early on in the movie where he starts playing a Beatles song to people that have never heard it, and they in a bar, and they ignore him, and he comes to the conclusion that, oh, it's me. It's not obviously not the song, it's me. And that was like, oh my, is this movie going to start talking about art and artists and what's the magic formula? And it just completely just abandons that after that and doesn't care.
Well, I think it ultimately takes the position that that true art does withstand generations in cultural context. Like by the mere sheer fact, I don't think this is really giving anything away. Like by sheer dint of the fact that he starts becoming popular for having played the songs, I think the movie does take a position that these songs were great, and it doesn't matter the vessel that they're in. They will still be recognized for their greatness regardless. And I thought that's an interest. Like I'm thinking, like, do I agree with that position? You know what I mean? It's a position. Do I agree with it? I don't know. And there's many things that the movie does that are like that I'm just like, it's taking a position on things, and I don't know if I agree with them, but I'm thinking about it. I mean, it's got my mind cooking on things.
It's like the idea is like if Jeff, if Star Wars, memory of Star Wars disappeared across the entire culture, and you're the only person that remembers it, is it plagiarism, or is it like honoring this material to keep it within the culture?
Well, that's a really interesting question. But also, it talks about the thing that I kept churning on too when I was watching it is he plays like late career Beatles songs out of context, right? So our culture got A Hard Day's Night and this progression of Beatles music that leads to Sgt. Pepper's and the White Album and all these, like they were already massive hits and household names and known quantities to the entire world before they started experimenting and doing these really incredibly artful compositions. And he sort of dumps that on the world immediately. I wanted some analysis of that, and I started thinking of it on my own, right? But I feel like I'm doing the heavy lifting in this case, and the movie is just interested in this fluffy nothing storyline that has the opportunity to go there and just aborts.
I'll just say one other thing that the movie really made me realize, and then we can move into spoilers because there's much more to talk about, is that there is something distinct about not even just music, but pop music, right? That like that is singular in terms of its ability to be replicated and in terms of its ability to be spread. If, like you said, Devindra, like if Star Wars vanished and never existed again, first of all, it'd be pretty freaking hard to like recreate it. This is.
I think Jeff Kanata would be able to piece together Star Wars from memory.
Even if Jeff could memorize every single scene, like the idea is that you need like need like dozens of people to collaborate with.
Sure.
this
And that is
guy
just
can
really
stand on stage with a guitar and do it.
Yeah, you can. It's one dude with a guitar can change the entire world, and I think that is that's another thing that the movie kind of. That is, in fact, a truth I actually believe in. I think that's true. That can happen, and I think the movie really illustrates that well. Like if,
I want the opportunity to have to recreate Star Wars. If the world flashed and it went away, please, I will be the hero we need.
But it's like if he woke up and like Michelangelo had never painted the Sistine Chapel. It's like, well, that's not something you can really do again. Do you know what I mean? Like. It's not like you can just get up there and start doing it. Like there's something about how accessible pop music is, but also how complex it is and how universal it can be that I thought this movie really brought to light and that I thought was really compelling. So even though the movie is only okay, it had enough interesting ideas. It had enough going for it. And it is, as you pointed out, Devindra, a perfectly pleasant movie. It's a great date movie. It's a great movie to take your family to.
It's a perfect date movie.
It's just like, you know what? It could do worse. I don't think it's a calamity like Jeff thinks it is.
Well, I perhaps overstated that. I don't feel it's a failure on every level, as I said, but on every level that matters for me, it is a failure. You're right, and I agree that it is perfectly watchable and charming in a variety of ways, but just the potential is there to be something so much more interesting, and that I think it just drops the ball, and I find it very frustrating, a movie, and I don't give it any credit for the charming stuff because it feels like a cop-out.
I kind of feel like at the very least, imagine being tapped to make the next James Bond movie. Right. This is one of the greatest franchises of all time. A character you grew up with, you have the honor of doing it. And then after working on it for years, I think even, or months, certainly a while, it gets taken away from you. I feel like Danny Boyle needed this movie. He needed something happy. He's like, I'm going to make a happy movie about the songs that make me happy, that bring, joy to the world. And I'm just going to do that. And I appreciate that at the very least.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, Devindra. I find your reverence of the Bond franchise to be a little puzzling at this point, just because, like,
you don't think that was a big loss for him, though, Dave? Like,
I just don't think we can know. I just don't think we can know, and also I think that like
he's also talked about it heavily in all the interviews. So
I think the Bond franchise is just like a really retrograde franchise. I mean, like I think that it's really old fashioned and outdated. And yeah, maybe he would have brought something new to it. I guess we'll see what happens with the new Bond. I believe Phoebe Waller-Bridge is going to write some for it. That should be pretty interesting. Yeah. Cary Fukunaga's directing. So like maybe
don't act like you're not excited for the next James Bond movie. What are you talking about?
I mean, Devindra, the last Bond was like really terrible. It was very bad.
It was really bad. It was not great. But within the past decade, we've gotten a couple that I think are genuinely great. But maybe I also remember you just didn't care for Skyfall, which is insanity. Yeah. But okay. And also, I'm not talking about your love for Bond. I'm talking about this guy who grew up, in the UK, who was able to make Bond. That loss, I think, I felt that as a fan of Danny Boyle. I wanted to see what a Danny Boyle James Bond movie would look like. And I guess looking after that, like thinking about it, like where he would go next, I think there's an interesting read here. And like, yeah, that's all. I'm just pointing out that connection. And I find that an interesting lead after that failure, basically.
All right, let's get to spoilers for yesterday starting right now. All right, so a few things to talk about the end of this movie, which is pretty odd at best. So let's point out some of the performances in here. I actually really enjoyed Ed Sheeran. humiliating himself for our benefit, like playing a really egotistical version of himself.
Hey, dude, that's a good idea.
Yeah. Hey, dude. One of my favorite moments was when his phone rings and it's his own song playing on the ringtone. I just thought that was like such a great little touch to show like what kind of person that is. I thought Kate McKinnon was in a completely different movie. I mean, I think like, yes, this movie is like very, very broad in some ways, but her performance, while I enjoyed it, was really over the top and felt like it just didn't quite fit in with the tone of the rest of the film. But I still always like a fun Kate McKinnon performance. I did enjoy it. It just felt like really out of place for me.
I think for me, she really cemented like what this movie is trying to be. Like it is this like fun, breezy stab at pop culture and commentary about music as a product in the music industry. Like it's certainly not deep, but it is really fun to watch Kate McKinnon break down music as a product. And we also get that crazy, was it the master of media?
That was a fun scene when they're like doing the marketing plan for
what was it called?
I don't know what you're referring to.
Yeah.
Like the name for the
meeting of
this the big marketing summit, right, where they like decide how to market this album. And I actually thought that was delightful. Like I thought it was a great. I wish the movie had been more like that, where like it felt like it had more to say about the modern music industry. Instead, we get a few mild stabs like that. Jeff Cannata, my guess about what you're talking about earlier on with regards to like the movie lets him off the hook, particularly late in the game, is like when the two people who also know the Beatles encounter him. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that's one of the moments. But I feel like over and over and over, it sort of lets him off the hook, as it doesn't ever challenge his assumptions on anything, or he. There's a weird scene where we get the chase you to the chase you to the airport or train station that we have to have in a lot of romantic comedies, and yet he thought that he missed her, but she was sitting in the thing and she missed her own train for some reason. And I don't even know why we had that scene, because they seemed to be fine. And then he woke up and was like, no, I don't know. The movie lets him off the hook. But yes, those two people, I thought it was an interesting take that they're like, no, we need to have the Beatles music, but it just completely sidesteps the notion of plagiarism and what that means, and that he's
how could you plagiarize something that nobody knows exists? Like I think that's the bigger question too. It's not like he admits that he found these songs somewhere, but it's not like anybody else can point to it and be like, oh, you definitely stole those songs. I do wonder like what he is remembered as culturally, right? This weird guy who says these songs were discovered somewhere else.
Right. And at the end, I don't buy the end of this movie whatsoever that he just sort of can be a school teacher playing Obladi for people. It's just like,
well, the ending, the climactic sequence in this movie, it feels ridiculous. It feels like it was written by someone who has no idea how the modern music industry works, right? Like the idea that like, oh, I uploaded them to the internet, so now you can stream them for free. Like, as though that would, yes, the fact that you people don't need to stream it or whatever, that's like, yes, that's good. They don't need to go through Spotify to get it. But like, then he says like, oh, I didn't actually write the music. These four dudes you've never heard of wrote the music. Like the idea that would be, what are the people? What's the Twitter reaction to that? Like people are
not only that, but evidently those people actually exist in this universe.
Yeah,
because
they exist.
I loved the scene with John Lennon. I was completely bowled over by the audacity of going there.
It's Robert Carlyle as John Lennon.
Oh, wow.
Nice. Yeah. Unbelievable. I mean, the visual of him opening that door, I did not see that coming. For a second, I was like, did they get Paul McCartney to do this? And then they opened the door and I was like, wow, I did not see that coming. That is bold and ballsy. But also it adds a massive sci-fi ramification to this that you have to go, well, okay, so what does that mean? He lived clearly because he wasn't famous, so no one, Sirhan didn't kill him. So did he not meet Paul McCartney? Did they not grow up together? Like what?
And also, why is John Lennon welcoming in this complete stranger that he probably has no idea who he is into his house?
Right.
He probably doesn't get many visitors over there.
To give him like advice on life. Yeah. You know, I understand that the movie's trying to say like, hey, at the end of the day, all that really matters is like the people you love and like that you live a life that's happy and don't worry about all the fame and the money. You know, like that's what the movie's trying to say. But I felt like the introduction of John Lennon, that conversation, it just all felt extremely clunky to me. Like it felt like we're using a sledgehammer to make this point when
it was like the scene in Forrest Gump when he's like, imagine, it's easy, no religion too. It's like this goofy Forrest Gump moment instead of what it could have been, which is an awesome sci-fi moment. And it completely makes the end where he's like, these 4 people made this music. It's like, well, I guess we'll look those people up and figure out what the hell's going on.
Like he's just upended those people's lives, who, by the way, will have no idea what the hell he's talking about, right?
Right.
Like whatever. Well, he could be referring to any of these people with these names. I don't know. Like the movie doesn't explore that, but Jeff, like I see what you're saying, but yeah, for me, the fact that I didn't expect this movie to really explore the sci-fi ramifications of everything around this premise. And I think that meeting, the Lennon meeting, for me, even though it doesn't make any logical sense, there's no reason this guy would welcome a complete stranger to his house and just have like a meaningful life chat with him. It works on a character level. I think it worked thematically with what this movie was trying to get to. I mean, this movie also brings up the idea of other things that don't exist after this weird power blink, like cigarettes don't blink. Like, does that mean like millions of people aren't dying every year because they're smoking? Like, there's no Coca-Cola. I guess that's a thing. I like the Oasis joke. That was fun.
Yeah, that was fun.
The movie doesn't really explore a lot of that, and it tends to focus on like what this whole concept means to these lead characters.
It's just throwing in all this random stuff to be like it didn't feel like there was like, oh, I understand why like these 5 things didn't exist. Like it's just throwing in all these random things to like surprise you, but like someone tweeted out today like, okay, so in the movie yesterday, cigarettes don't exist, but does that mean tobacco doesn't exist? And if so, like the U.S. economy, like one of our biggest crutches of our economy was tobacco when it was first founded. So does that mean the U.S. is not a superpower anymore? Like it's just like the movie is completely uninterested in exploring any of that stuff. And that's fine, but then like don't introduce these concepts with reckless abandon is what I would say, right? I will say this.
I want to correct myself because I said Sirhan, and I got confused. That's Robert F. Kennedy's murderer. Sorry, it's not that. Sorry.
Another 3-name guy.
Yeah. So please, you can even edit that out if you want to, because that was a major faux pas.
Yeah. All right. So the only other thing I wanted to point out is one thing I really liked about the movie is like I liked what it had to say about art and artists, right? And there's this scene when he is playing Let It Be for his parents, and he keeps getting interrupted by people visiting him and stuff. And it's like a very like slapstick kind of moment.
Yeah.
And at one point he loses his patience with his parents, and he says something like, he gets so frustrated. He's like, this is like, what does he say? Does he say like Michael or Leonardo da Vinci about to paint the Mona Lisa? He's like, I'm like trying to paint the Mona Lisa in front of you, basically, like, and you're not paying attention. And it occurred to me that like to his parents, he is delusional.
Yeah.
Right. But to him, he understands that this art is like so brilliant that it must get out into the world. And it is a metaphor for anyone who is an artist. Anyone who is an artist who does something, who podcasts, who paints pictures, who directs movies, who makes music.
You have to be a bit delusional.
You have to be you have to like if some part of you believes that you have something interesting to contribute to the world. And that may be, a huge part of it. It may be a small part of it, but like there is a part of you that's like what I am making has inherent value. And it has, in some cases, more value than what other people are making because, not all art can be shared and viewed equally. And I love that metaphor. I love the idea that, like, people who are artists think they have the world's greatest works, or some of the world's greatest works inside them just waiting to come out.
Or worthy works.
Yeah, worthy works, right? And
I love that, and I totally feel that metaphor as well. I loved that scene, but I also think that scene works literally because I don't know about you guys, but I have been in that exact situation, minus the genius piece of art, but the situation where your parents or loved ones,
look at this thing I made, please.
They're like,
please.
no, they're like, hey, can we please watch? I want to know about that thing you do or you made. What's that cool thing? And you're like, okay, well, let's all gather around the computer. I'm going to load it up and press play, and then they start talking, and you're like, what? Can we? Okay, do you want me to pause it and we can finish our conversation and then we can start watching it? And they're like, no, we're watching. And then you start pushing play and they go, yeah, no, because I think you're talking over the thing I spent so much time working on.
Yeah,
you're talking. Do you want to watch it or do you want to talk? Because we can talk
all the time. Yeah,
it is a very relatable scene for me, many times over in my life.
Yeah, and that's the kind of stuff I'm talking about. It's like, oh wow, like I realize that like this is a metaphor for all artists, like that everyone thinks they have something valuable to contribute to the world, and even though the movie itself is not that good, I like that it like got that part of my mind thinking about like, to what extent is art, like making art, delusional, right? To what extent is it a delusional process that like that to the world it's nuts, but to you it actually all makes sense. You're the only one that can see what it truly is. Mm-hmm. Even though the movie's not that good, it got me thinking about these things. So that's why I'm kind of a fan of it. Kind of would recommend it. But yeah, we mentioned the bit at the end where like the other two people know what the Beatles sound like. And I thought that was a delightful scene when they're chatting and they're like, we've actually had difficulty like recreating the lyrics ourselves, but like, hey, dude, really? Did you have to, and it made me realize like this guy, the guy we're seeing, he knows the Beatles, and that is a kind of special hell because he's living in a world where the Beatles didn't exist and only he knows about it. But at least he can like play the music. Like, what kind of hell must it be to wake up, know the Beatles, but not be able to play music? Like
sing.
Can you imagine like waking up and like you've seen like the greatest musical artists of all time and you know about them, but like you lack the ability to convey it to people, right? That's like Black Mirror, like nightmare material,
dark.
Right there, right? Yeah, it's like nightmarish to me.
But
the movie doesn't really explore that at all, right? So like,
no. I know. I thought that was clever, but it just felt like a little bit of a cop out of what he's actually doing, and no like why us three? What else do you remember? Coke? Do you what else do you remember? Would have been all very welcome moments as far as I'm
Jeff,
concerned.
I'm wondering, what are you asking for? Like, what sort of reckoning were you hoping for this character to see?
I would like the movie to reckon with its own rules. I would like the movie to reckon with its own premise and say, okay, it's not just about the movie's about a guy who realizes he was in love with the girl who was standing next to him all along.
Right.
And that's so boring and banal in the context of, oh my God, the Beatles don't exist. What does that mean? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, the Beatles don't exist. What does that mean? What does that mean? What would you do? Like I kind of loved the hey dude moment, but I also feel like way earlier than that, this guy would have maybe made some tweaks. Because who knows? Like, maybe you wouldn't talk about stuff that wasn't pertinent to your life. No one's gonna know. Like, I kind of, or does he think if I change the music at all or the lyrics at all, then I ruin whatever magic it was that made them hits?
He reveres it so much that I don't think he would have done that. Even the Hey Dude thing was like a push.
If we had some thought about that, like some exploration of it, all is juice that's inherent in the premise that the movie just ignores and could have made for a much more satisfying plot. Like, I'm just thinking of this now, but there's a movie called I love this movie. What was it called? There's a time travel movie.
Is that the other Richard Curtis one? About Time?
About Time. Yes. Yeah. About Time. About Time is a romantic comedy. Is that a Richard Curtis movie?
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Yeah. It's phenomenal. Phenomenal. It does
really
everything.
good.
It was like one of your favorite movies of that year, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It does everything this movie doesn't. It has this cool time travel thing. It has this cool sci-fi premise, and it wants to be a romantic comedy, and it succeeds at both. Like it really honors the setup and explores what the ramifications of his time travel are, and has rules and sticks to those rules and all the things that you have to do for sci-fi, and also is a charming romantic comedy. And it does everything this movie doesn't. I think this movie just skates by on this sort of hokey, all you need is love, and she was standing right there the whole time.
Yeah.
That is not as good as the ideas it brings up.
Yeah. I also think you're right that like the way that it's executed is also even the like rote execution of the romantic comedy bits are really lacking. Like there's that confrontation they have at the coffee shop at the train station, and she's basically like gives him the ultimatum of like, hey, I know you're what's seeming to be a singular talent, who's brought us music that the likes of which this world has never seen before, and that will last for generations. But by the way, if you don't come home right now, like it's not going to work out between us.
Right.
It's just like, really, is that really how that would play out? Like they couldn't like
Right.
they couldn't go long distance for a little bit. They just like.
Yeah, and then she like gets with that other dude, but he's cool with when our hero comes around. He's cool with stepping aside, and like, the movie just lets him off the hook, lets all of the characters off the hook all the time. There's no stakes for anything. We can have this big moment in front of millions of people where he shows her on the big screen, even though he didn't ask her permission, and she's totally fine with that. And the audience is just like, oh, okay, well, I guess we won't bother you anymore in your life. It's just, it's so weird. And like, it doesn't
feel authentic to the world that this movie has created, right?
Exactly.
Like the movie gets some things right about virality, about like how an artist can become famous, about like getting tons of YouTube views. I like how
at the beginning, I think somebody would be trying to put this stuff on the internet, whereas he's going the old school. I'm just gonna play a couple of pubs.
He's doing pubs. Like, he's doing like local news stations. Yeah. He's handing out his CDs in at his like Costco area of employment.
The internet's right there. You don't need any permission to put music up there.
Yeah. And like he kind of goes the old fashioned way, but it's like that is a path that one could pursue, so it's very plausible. But then I mean then the movie goes into Crazy Town with this whole ending where he's like none of it plays out in a way that feels emotionally true, right? She's just standing there with the camera pointing at her. She obviously knows what's happening, right? She obviously knows she's in front of like 100,000 people, but she's just gonna like stare longingly into the camera. Dude.
It feels to me like that entire scene was contrived because Danny Boyle thought it would be cool to have a giant her face image standing behind him as he made this monologue.
It does look amazing though. Like
it does look amazing.
The whole tableau looks amazing.
Super contrived and weird.
Yeah. Agreed. But overall, despite all that, I still recommend it. I still say like it's a good sit. It's fun. I
think once this movie hits streaming, I think a ton of people will be into it. Like I don't know if this will be a big theater hit. I haven't seen the box office, but
the box office is surprisingly good. It's around $17 million. It's one of the few films of the summer that has performed, that's kind of adult skewing, that has performed better than people thought it would. So.
I also, by the way, was entirely ready for this the entire movie to be a weird dream sequence that he had after being hit by a bus. I thought that he was going to wake up in the hospital without his teeth at the end and be like, oh, crazy. And then the radio would come on. It would be the Beatles. And he'd be like, oh, I love you. Let's go make music together. But kudos for it not doing that, I guess.
Yeah.
I do want to say one of the biggest kicks I got out of the movie was when he plays Yesterday, like right after he gets out of the hospital, and everyone just reacts to it like, "Oh my gosh, that was incredible!" Like that was just such a delightful way of like introducing the concept to both the character and to us. And on that note, like the extremely poor reception to his music, like the summer song music, I thought was really a funny juxtaposition as well. That was the one thing that Kate McKinnon said that, like, I'm gonna be quoting that line probably for a long time, when she says something like, "It's somehow simple without being charming, and I hate it, but I'm not interested enough to listen to it again to understand why." You know?
Yeah.
Which is, one way I could sum up many reviews of the Slash Filmcast. So,
I also liked the scenes of him struggling to remember all the lyrics exactly.
Yeah.
Like
and like they do the cutaways to like there's a lot of Danny Boyle flourishes in this movie.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Dutch angles. Danny Boyle's doing a lot of superimposing text onto location, like locations.
Big text,
huge text into like locations now, and like these cutaways to the lyrics, like that he's kind of remembering, and then like the cutaways are changing as he's going along. I thought,
which I think was eventually the actual footage of his actual wedding to her.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. So a lot of good stuff. And that's going to bring us to the end of our review of yesterday. Thanks for listening. You can find more episodes of this podcast at slashfilmcast.com. Email us at slashfilmcast@gmail.com. Our theme song comes from adamwarrock.com. Our spoiler bumper comes from filmmaker Kyle Hillinger. And our Slash Film Court music comes from Simon M. Harris. Actually, Simon M. Harris is a different site now, so I want to make sure I mention that correctly. It is smhmusic.com. smhmusic.com is the guy who wrote our Slash Film Court music. Stay tuned to hear what we'll be discussing next week. In the meantime, Devindra Hardawar, where can you find more of your work on the internet this week?
Oh, you can find me on Twitter at Devindra, and I write about tech at Engadget.com. Also doing a tech podcast at nomoretech.net. That's no with a K.
How about you, Jeff Kanata?
I'm on Twitter at Jeff Kanata with 2 N's and 1 T. And I do a video game podcast called DLC, which you can find at 5by5.tv/DLC. And I also do a narrative show called The Dungeon Run. It's a live play Dungeons and Dragons show where I'm the DM, making up the story for a bunch of players to play through. I hope you check it out. I'm really proud of it. And it's on YouTube as well as on anywhere you get audio podcasts as an audio-only show. It's called The Dungeon Run. Just search for it there. Or tune in live Wednesday nights at 6 p.m. Pacific time at caffeine.tv/The Dungeon Run.
Find all my stuff at davechen.net. You can also subscribe to get emails from me at davechen.net/letters. There's going to be some interesting updates going on in the next few months. I'd urge you to subscribe to check them out. Next week, we'll be discussing Spider-Man Far From Home. And also, there's probably going to be some what we've been watching discussion of Under the Silver Lake, if you want to brush up on that. So that is streaming right now on Amazon Prime Video. But yeah, Spider-Man Far From Home. I'm really looking forward to diving into this one with you folks. It's going to be a lot of fun. Thanks for listening to the Slash Filmcast. We'll see you next week.